F.M. Alexander's books were published between 1910 and 1941. His books are often considered difficult to read because they have long, winding sentences with many clauses. He was not always clear in his books, in part because he didn't want people to steal his ideas. But in his first book, Man's Supreme Inheritance, he does make two clear statements on the correct orientation and relative position of the arms. When I first read these passages, I took note of them because at the time I was looking for any piece of concrete information I could get my hands on. I was glad to finally have something that was straightforward, that required no interpretation. But it wasn't until I came to study with Jando Masawero that I found someone else who made note of these passages and their importance. And of course, as he's done many times, Masawero made Alexander's statements even clearer, and he provides us with practical means by which to actually use the information. Let's get right to our first passage. Take the case, for example, of a boy who stoops very much, and combines a sinking above and below the clavicles with abnormal protrusion of the shoulder blades. With the arms hanging vertically, the relative position of that part of the thorax where the lungs are situated will be seen to be in front of the arms, instead of being, as it should be, behind them. Alexander says that when a person's arms are hanging vertically, you should see the part of their thorax where the lungs are situated, which we can understand to mean essentially the upper end of the rib cage, as that is where the lungs are. We should see that part of the torso behind the arms. If we look at examples of so-called good posture, we see that this part of their torso where the lungs are is not behind the arms. Instead, we see a hollowed-out back. We see the part of their torso with the lungs somewhat in front of the arms. In pictures of those with poor posture, it is the same. So is this posture that Alexander recommended even possible? You won't see many people who can satisfy this clear criteria for good posture that Alexander put forward. We can even see that many Alexander technique teachers do not live up to Alexander's words. If we look at an old and a newer picture of me, you can see that as I've improved my posture, I've gone from having my arms behind my lungs to having my arms in front of my lungs. We can also look at Alexander and Masawero to see that yes, indeed, it is possible to maintain the arms forward of the lungs. Masawero makes the idea a little more precise and straightforward. He tells us we would like to have the arm rest vertically straight in front of the frontal plane or the plane of the ribs. As I mentioned last episode, most people would need to move their arms tremendously far forward to accomplish that. It won't be accomplished in one fell swoop, but it's where you're going if you follow this path. The second passage from Alexander will help us understand how we're going to get the arm so far forward. The average civilized man of today stands as a rule with the palms of his hands towards his body, his elbows to the back, his thumbs forward. The properly coordinated person stands with the back of his hands forward, the thumbs inward, and the elbows slightly bent outwards. This is a curious but little-known test which, in my experience, has never failed as an index of imperfect muscular coordination. This is some very specific information, and it's saying something that's really quite startling. Do we understand our own bodies so little that we don't even know which direction our elbow joint is supposed to face? I can certainly say that's how I used to let my arms rest, elbows back. We modern people appear to be completely divorced from our bodies. We carelessly twist our elbow joint into a contorted position and never think twice about it. It seems there should be consequences for doing this, and maybe there are many consequences to this irrational twisting. We may have just failed to put two and two together. If we return to comparing an older picture of me with a newer one, we see that I've had to rotate my arm in order to straighten it. We can see that the tip of the elbow points in an entirely different direction. The road we are on is one that will lead to a complete change in the orientation of the arm and a radically new way of using the arm. We are not looking for a small change here, and I have no doubt that if you make some progress in getting your arms forward, out, and down, you will be happy with how that affects the condition of your arms and your torso. This clear difference is what makes the system I'm advising different from most other things out there. Other systems will make vague assurances about what they offer. They'll tell you they can make you feel a little better. They'll say they can reduce the bend in your back a bit, but they typically will not tell you that you are going to completely relocate your arm. I think this is because most people out there with advice about posture don't really understand much about posture. Therefore, they would not be willing to suggest such a significant change. If you're not working with an effective system, this amount of change would likely seem impossible to you. They also may not like the idea of making an unambiguous claim that they will help you change your body in such a large way. Because if you draw a clear line like this and tell someone you can get them there, you can fail at helping the person to get there, and you can be proven to have failed. I don't fear this because there is nothing ambiguous or mysterious about how you can move your arm this far forward, out, and down. I know that this orientation of the body stretches the fascia appropriately, and I know that a set of directions can be implemented to bring about these changes in essentially anyone and everyone. I am not special. I was only able to relocate my arm because I was given the appropriate means by which to make this change, and I spent the time implementing those means. You too will make this change if you put the time and effort in, and as I said, I'm quite confident you will see how this improves the condition of your arms as well as your body more generally. So let's begin working with the arms. We'll need to define some points. First, we'll define the tip of the elbow. If you touch your left shoulder blade with the fingers of your left hand, like you're patting yourself on the back, you can then use your right index finger to find the furthest bony point on your elbow. That is what we will call the tip of the elbow. Our directions for the tip of the elbow will be what? Do you remember the directions we want to apply to the upper portion of the arm? Forward, out, and down. To practice this, take a seat. It would be best if you had a webcam or camera set up so you can film yourself from the side. Let your arms rest at your sides. See which direction the tip of your elbow is pointing. Then give yourself the directions to move the tip of the elbow forward, out, and down. Just do one arm to begin with. If your elbow was pointing somewhat back, your elbow should move in space when you implement the directions. Try it on a 1, 2, 3 count. Check how the tip of your elbow has moved from 1 to 3. If it really hasn't moved very much, try again. The next thing we can consider is that we want the tip of the elbow to be forward of the lower ribs. Try on a 1, 2, 3 count to move the tip of your elbow forward, out, and down in order to point it outward and move it forward of the front of the ribs. A camera is really helpful here so you can truly know if your elbow is forward of your ribs. Typically, when I ask someone to do this, something happens. If you're going to try it out, pause the video now and start it again once you've tried, as I don't want to ruin the experiment for you. Usually, when I ask someone to do this procedure for the first time, they will move their entire arm forward so that their hand is very far forward of their body. This is, of course, not what was requested and is not what we want. Our goal is to straighten the arm and let it hang with gravity. That's obviously impossible if you have your hand way out forward of your body. Do you have to move your hand forward to move your elbow forward? In the next episode, we'll begin to look at the forearm, which, as we've seen, is doing something different than the upper arm. Try experimenting with this idea of directing the tips of the elbows forward, out, and down. Experiment with moving the tip of the elbow forward of the lower ribs. And if you had to move your hand forward of your body to accomplish that, is there something else you can do? Can you keep your arm vertically straight? What do you need to do to the arm to accomplish that? Play around with this and then join me next episode, and we'll get to the forearm.